If you're a diabetic or over the age of 45, you need to hear this because the very foods you've trusted your whole life may be silently pushing your blood sugar higher every single day. And once you understand what's really happening inside your body, you'll never look at your meals the same way again. High carbohydrate intake has become one of the greatest drivers of diabetes in our modern world, and it's important to understand that this is not how humans were designed to eat. If you look back through history, every culture had one primary carbohydrate that they relied on. Asia had rice, Italy had pasta and bread, the South Pacific had sweet potatoes and cassava, the Middle East had flatbreads made from ancient grains, and northern countries like Scotland and England relied heavily on oats. These foods were staples, but they were eaten in a balanced lifestyle where meals were simple, naturally prepared, and not surrounded by an endless buffet of additional starches. People ate what grew in their region, and moderation happened naturally because there simply weren't dozens of carbohydrate options at every meal. But now we are living in a time unlike any other. It is almost as if all the carbohydrates from all the different cultures have been placed onto one giant table, and human beings are eating from that entire table every day. You walk into a supermarket and you see rice from Asia, tortillas from Mexico, pasta from Italy, French bread, American cereals, Middle Eastern pita, Scottish oatcakes, Australian crackers, Polynesian starch snacks, and then all the processed modern versions layered on top of this traditional foundation. Never before in human history have we had such an abundance of carbs, so easily available, so cheap, and so quick to consume. And the body, which was designed to handle one or two starches a day, is now battling dozens of sources of glucose morning, noon, and night. What makes this even more challenging is that modern carbohydrates are not the same as the ones our ancestors ate. They were whole, they were unprocessed, they were eaten with their natural fibers intact. Today, carbohydrates are refined, milled, bleached, sweetened, softened, and engineered to digest faster. Or down the white bread, instant cereals, pastries, crackers, noodles, pizza crust, these foods hit the bloodstream almost immediately as glucose. And because people are eating so many of them throughout the day, the pancreas is constantly being asked to produce more and more insulin to keep blood sugar under control. This constant insulin demand is one of the biggest reasons diabetes has become so widespread. The pancreas is working far harder than it had to in previous generations. When carbohydrate consumption increases dramatically, insulin secretion must increase dramatically alongside it. But the human body doesn't thrive under constant pressure. There is a limit to how long the pancreas can keep pushing out large waves of insulin, and there is a limit to how long the cells can keep responding without becoming resistant. The truth is that the rise in diabetes tracks almost perfectly with the rise in refined carbohydrates. The more access people have to processed foods, the more diabetes grows. As societies became wealthier, as supermarkets expanded, as people moved into cities and away from whole natural foods, the rates of diabetes climbed. You can look at any country on the map, and as soon as processed carbohydrates become a major part of the diet, diabetes begins spreading wildfire. This was not happening when people ate a simple diet based on one main starch paired with vegetables, legumes, and proteins. It is the overload, the abundance, the mixing of every global carbohydrate into one diet that is overwhelming human biology. The body simply cannot keep up with this modern tide of glucose, and diabetes becomes the natural consequence of this dramatic shift in how we eat. Modern diets overload the body with fast carbohydrates in a way that human physiology was never designed to handle, and this is one of the greatest contributors to the global rise of diabetes today. When we look at how people ate for thousands of years, meals took time, preparation, and patience. Grains had to be soaked, pounded, milled by hand. Bread required kneading and rising. Potatoes needed boiling, cassava needed hours of preparation, and rice had to be washed and cooked slowly. Nothing about food was instant. Because of this slower pace, the body received carbohydrates in a gentler, more gradual form. The glucose entered the bloodstream at a pace that the pancreas could comfortably manage. Insulin was released in modest amounts and the cells stayed sensitive and responsive. But now look at what has happened in the last few decades. We have moved into an age of fast living where the pace of life has exceeded the pace of biology. People wake up tired because they stay up too late watching screens, and when they are rushing out the door, they reach for the quickest thing they can find. And what does the modern world offers? Quick food, packet cereals coated in sugar, soft breads made from highly refined white flour, pastries, convenient snacks, and an endless supply of cookies, donuts, crackers, energy bars, and chips. These foods digest in minutes. And when they hit the stomach and then the bloodstream, they break down with lightning speed into glucose, pushing blood sugar levels sky high in a very short time. When food raises the blood sugar rapidly, the pancreas gets the message to release a large wave of insulin to bring it down again. And so the body begins a roller coaster that repeats all day long.
Insulin drives it back down, and by 10 a.m. they are shaky, hungry, tired, and searching for a muffin or a cookie or a chocolate bar. That snack sends glucose back again, and then it crashes, and soon they are pouring another cup of coffee with sugar to keep going. The body is never given a moment of calm or balance. It is constantly being pushed too high, then pulled too low, all because the foods being chosen are processed, refined, and stripped of the natural fibers and nutrients that once slowed everything down. When you look at these foods, there is nothing slow about them. Bread takes minutes, cereal takes seconds, pasta cooks in 10 minutes, pizza is ordered and delivered in 20, even rice today is instant. And the problem is not just that they are fast to prepare it, that they break down fat inside the body as well. A slice of white bread can raise blood sugar faster than table sugar. A bowl of cereal can register on the glycemic index higher than a chocolate bar. And people often don't realize that many of these carbohydrates come from wheat that has been hybridized to contain a very rapid release starch called amylopectin A. This starch behaves almost as pure glucose, meaning the spike in blood sugar is dramatic and the burden placed on the pancreas is enormous.
We now have a population that is eating foods that digest too quickly, entering the bloodstream too quickly, and demanding too much insulin from an organ that was never meant to handle this constant load. The more often this cycle repeats, the more worn out the pancreas becomes, and the more resistant the cells become to insulin. This is exactly how insulin resistance develops. It is the outcome of a modern lifestyle that values speed over nourishment. The body thrives on steady, slow energy release, not these modern fast carbs that hit like a tidal wave. If we continue feeding ourselves these quick, convenient carbohydrate foods, the pancreas never gets a chance to rest, and diabetes becomes almost inevitable, simply because the modern diet is too fast for the body to handle. People today are living in a rhythm that is completely out of harmony with how the body was designed to function. And one of the clearest examples of this is the way late night create a domino effect that pushes people toward quick, unhealthy breakfasts. When the body does not get enough sleep, it wakes up in a stressed, depleted state. The hormones are off balance, the mind feels foggy, and the body is desperate for quick energy. And because so many people stay up far too late, scrolling through phones, watching shows, playing games, the morning becomes a rushed, panicked moment rather than a gentle beginning to the day. They wake up late, they have only minutes to get ready, and they reach automatically for the fastest thing they can find. And what does the modern kitchen offer as fast food? Early in the morning. Processed carbohydrates, a box of cereal that pours in 2 seconds, bread that pops out of a toaster, sugary yogurt cup, a muffin picked up from a cafe, a quick pastry, a granola bar pretending to be healthy. These foods are chosen not because they nourish, but because they are quick. And in a world where people are tired and running behind schedule, speed becomes a priority over health. But the body does not respond to speed the way convenience culture does. When these quick carbohydrates hit the digestive system, they break down almost instantly into glucose. Blood sugar rises sharply. Insulin floods the bloodstream to push it back down. And within an hour or two, the person is hungry again. Not because they need more food, but because the food they ate had no staying power. Cereal, toast, pastries, and quick carbohydrate breakfast lack fiber, lack protein, and lack healthy fats. These are the 3 components that slow digestion and give the body a steady, even release of energy. When breakfast is missing these essentials, blood sugar behaves like a child on a trampoline, bouncing up and down with no stability. That mid-morning crash is a direct result of a fast breakfast, and as soon as the crash comes, the brain goes into emergency mode. It cries out for another fast sort of glucose. So people reach again for sweets, coffee with sugar, chocolate bars, cookies, donuts, energy drinks, or chips. They might not even be hungry. They are simply trying to correct the blood sugar chaos created by a rushed morning and the wrong kind of fuel. The pattern has become so normal that people hardly recognize it as abnormal. They think it is normal to wake up exhausted. They think it is normal to need coffee and sugar just to function. They think it is normal to crave snacks mid-morning. But what is happening is not normal. It is the predictable outcome of a lifestyle that ignores sleep and relies on quick carbohydrates to compensate. The body is not designed to operate on fast-release glucose first thing in the morning. It is designed for slow, steady, nourishing energy. When breakfast lacks this foundation, the entire day becomes unstable and blood sugar swings become unavoidable. It is no wonder diabetes is increasing when we consider the average morning routine. When people are chronically sleep deprived, the body produces more stress hormones like cortisol, which naturally raises blood sugar. Add a high glycemic quick breakfast on top of that, and the pancreas is forced to pump out even more insulin.
Morning after morning, year after year, this cycle wears down the pancreas that overwhelms the cells, eventually leading to insulin resistance.
And because people repeat this cycle daily, they begin to think hunger, fatigue, cravings, and energy crashes are just part of life. If people simply went to bed earlier, woke up with time to breathe, and chose food with fiber, protein, and healthy fats, their blood sugar would stabilize dramatically. The morning sets the tone for the entire day, and when that tone is rushed, tired, and filled with fast carbs, the consequences ripple through every organ, especially the pancreas. The modern habit of staying up late and grabbing quick carbohydrate breakfasts is not a small inconvenience. It is one of the key factors pushing millions toward diabetes because the body is never given a calm, steady start. The demand for quick energy becomes a trap, and the pancreas pays the price. When we talk about fast food today, most people bet drive-thrus, packets, boxes, and bags, foods that come out of factories wrapped in plastic, ready to be eaten in sachets. But when you step back and look at nature, true fast food has always been something very varied. When I lived in the rainforest raising my children, nothing that came from a packet was fast. If we wanted bread, we had to soak the grain, grind it, nat it, let it rise, bake it. If we wanted cereal, we had to crack the grain, roll it, toast it. Cakes had to be mixed from scratch. Potatoes had to be dug up and cooked. Rice had to be washed and steamed. Pasta had to be made by hand. None of these foods were fast. They were nourishing, but they took time, patience, and preparation. And because it took time, people naturally ate fewer carbohydrates and ate them in simpler forms. Fast forward to today, and everything has been flipped upside down. The very foods that used to take hours or even days to prepare now come ready-made in boxes, packets, cans, and freezer bags. Bread is soft and instant. Cereals require no cooking. Cakes and pastries are grabbed on the go. Pizza arrives at the door in minutes. Pasta comes in instant versions. Rice is microwaved in a pouch. And because these carbohydrate foods became fast to prepare, people began eating more of them. Convenience became king. The faster the food, the more attractive it became. And without even realizing it, humanity began shifting its entire diet toward quick, refined carbohydrates. But the real fast food, the fast food nature intended, is still the same as it has always been. Walk into a garden or a forest and you will find fast food everywhere. Pick an apple off a tree and eat it. Pull a carrot from the soil and bite into it. Grab a tomato off the vine. Slice a cucumber. Peel a banana. Snap off a stalk of celery. Nature fast food is fresh fruit and vegetables. They require no cooking, no packaging, no refining, and unlike modern convenience foods, they do not cause rapid spikes in blood sugar. Their natural fibers slow digestion, their minerals nourish rather than deplete their water content, hydrates instead of dehydrating. They are quick to eat but slow to digest, which is exactly what the human body needs. However, the modern world has conditioned people to believe that the faster the preparation, the better the food fits into a busy life. So when people get hungry, they don't think of grabbing an apple, they grab chips. They don't think of cucumbers, they think of crackers or pretzels. They don't think of grapes or oranges, they reach for cookies and chocolate. And this habit slowly rewires the way the body handles glucose. Every refined, fast carbohydrate breaks down rapidly, sending glucose rushing into the bloodstream. The pancreas gets overwhelmed, the insulin spikes become frequent, and soon enough, people are tired, sluggish, craving more sugar, and stuck in a cycle that spirals toward insulin resistance. The saddest part is that the world calls these refined foods fast, but inside the body they cause chaos, slow digestion, slow metabolism, and slow healing. They are fast only in preparation, not in their nutritional behavior. Natured fast foods, on the other hand, require no effort on your part, but give your body exactly what it needs: fiber that steadies glucose, antioxidants that support cell repair, vitamins that nourish the organs, enzymes that aid digestion, and minerals that stabilize energy levels. When people travel and ask me what they can prepare for me quickly or what I prefer to eat, I always tell them the same thing. Fruits and vegetables. That's the easiest thing you can have. Pick it, wash it, slice it, and eat ready. And it is the only true fast food that supports balanced blood sugar and gives the pancreas a gentle, steady workload. The body thrives on simplicity, and fruits and vegetables are the most effortless form of nourishment we can give it. If people would return to this and then replacing fast processed carbohydrates with nature real fat food, diabetes would decline dramatically because the body would finally receive fuel at the pace it was designed to handle. All carbohydrates, no matter where they come from, bread, pasta, rice, potatoes, fruit, pastries, cereals, get broken down into one simple molecule called glucose. This is the universal fuel that every cell in your body uses to create energy. But while glucose is essential for life, the way it enters the body, how quickly it enters, and how often it floods the bloodstream makes all the difference between health and disease. The moment glucose is released from the digestive tract, it is absorbed through the intestinal wall and carried directly into the bloodstream. From there, it travels straight to the liver, the project manager that decides where this glucose should go. The liver distributes some glucose to the muscles, some to the brain, some to the cells for immediate energy, and stores the rest as glycogen for later use. But none of that can happen smoothly without insulin, because insulin is the key that unlocks the cell so the glucose can enter. This is why the pancreas plays such a central role in blood sugar regulation. When glucose levels begin to rise, even slightly, the pancreas senses this and releases insulin into the bloodstream. Insulin travels through the circulation, knocking on the doors of cells, signaling them to open up and receive glucose. This process works beautifully when glucose enters the bloodstream slowly and steadily, as it does when a person eats vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and moderate amounts of unprocessed carbohydrates. The pancreas releases small amounts of insulin at a calm, even pace, and the cells stay responsive and willing to receive the fuel. But in the modern world, glucose does not enter the body gently. It often arrives at a tidal wave. A bowl of cereal or a slice of white bread or a pastry in the morning can cause a surge of glucose within minutes. The bloodstream becomes flooded and the pancreas is forced to release a large wave of insulin to try to bring this spike down quickly. Then when insulin pulls glucose out of the blood too fast, levels drop sharply, often too low, and the brain sends signals of hunger, fatigue, irritability, or cravings for something sweet. This is not a sign of true hunger. It is a sign of an unstable glucose and insulin cycle. And so people reach for more carbohydrates, more sugar, more snacks, and the pancreas releases even more insulin. The cycle repeats throughout the day, sometimes dozens of times, putting an enormous strain on the pancreas and overwhelming the cells with constant demands. When cells are repeatedly exposed to high insulin levels, they begin to protect themselves by resisting the insulin signal. They close their doors, they stop responding to the key. This is called insulin resistance, and it is the very foundation of type 2 diabetes. The cells are not starving because glucose is unavailable. They are starving because insulin can no longer open the doors. Meanwhile, glucose continues to rise in the bloodstream, and the pancreas, unaware that the issue is now resistance, simply tries harder, releasing even more insulin. Eventually, the pancreas becomes exhausted, inflamed, and unable to keep up, and blood sugar rises uncontrollably. This entire process begins with the simple fact that every carbohydrate becomes glucose. That is not the problem. The problem lies in the amount of glucose, the speed at which it enters the body, and how often the pancreas is forced to respond. When glucose comes from whole, unprocessed foods that contain fiber, protein, and healthy fats, it enters slowly, giving the pancreas time to work gently and steadily. But when glucose comes from refined carbohydrates, sugary foods, and processed starches, it hits the bloodstream too quickly, creating chaos and demanding insulin in large amounts. The human body was designed for gradual rises in glucose, not the explosive spikes created by modern food. When glucose enters the bloodstream slowly, the pancreas works in harmony with the liver and cells. When it enters too quickly, the system becomes overwhelmed. Understanding this simple truth, that all carbohydrates break down into glucose, helps us recognize why choosing the right carbohydrates in the right form is essential for stable blood sugar and for preventing the exhaustion of the pancreas that leads to diabetes. The pancreas is one of the most remarkable organs in the human body, and yet it is also one of the most overworked and mistreated in the modern world. It sits quietly behind the stomach, doing two major jobs every day without complaint. One of those jobs is digestion, releasing enzymes that break down fats, proteins, and carbohydrates in the gut. But the other job is what concerns us most when we talk about diabetes. The pancreas produces two powerful hormones that regulate blood sugar: insulin, which brings blood sugar down, and glucagon, which brings blood sugar up. These two hormones work like a beautifully choreographed dance, keeping the body glucose levels balanced and steady. When everything is functioning the way it should, this dance is smooth and effortless. The moment glucose enters the bloodstream, whether from a piece of fruit or a bowl of cereal or a sugary drink, the pancreas senses the rise. It responds by releasing insulin, which acts like a key that unlocks the doors of the cells so glucose can enter and be used for energy. Insulin's entire job is to lower blood sugar whenever it rises too high. It is a protective hormone designed to prevent the blood from becoming overloaded with glucose. But insulin can only work effectively when glucose enters the bloodstream gradually, in a steady trickle, not in sudden waves. Modern diets, however, force the pancreas to deal with wave after wave of glucose spikes, and that has consequences. Now let's look at glucagon, insulin partner. Glucagon is released when blood sugar drops too low. When this happens, the pancreas quickly stops its insulin production and switches to glucagon, signaling the liver to release real glucose back into the bloodstream. This raises blood sugar to a safe level again. The body is designed to keep blood sugar within a narrow, safe range, and this constant adjustment, insulin pulling it down, glucagon bringing it up, is the miracle that keeps your brain functioning, your muscles moving, and your organs alive. When this balance is respected, the body thrives. But when someone eats a high-carbohydrate diet filled with refined sugars, white flour, pastries, cereals, crackers, and sweetened drinks, the pancreas receives signals that are far more intense than it was meant to handle. Every spike in glucose demands a spike in insulin, and because these foods digest so quickly, the pancreas is constantly being told to produce more insulin, more often, and in larger amounts. When blood sugar crashes from the insulin surge, the brain panics and demands something sweet to bring it back up, which triggers glucagon, then more insulin, and on it goes. This back and forth craze is exhausting the pancreas in millions of people today. In a healthy body, insulin and glucagon work with gentle highs and gentle lows. But in modern life, the pancreas is being whipped back and forth like a horse being driven too hard. It barely has time to rest. Every sugary snack, every soft drink, every white bread sandwich, every bowl of pasta forces it into action. And when this happens day after day, year after year, the organ begins to tire. The cells of the body also suffer. They get flooded with insulin so often that they start to ignore it, becoming insulin resistant. It is as if the cells say, "We've had enough. We can't keep opening the door every time you knock." And yet, the more resistant they become, the more insulin the pancreas must release to force glucose inside. This is how the cycle of diabetes begins. Not in a moment, but through years of overworking the pancreas until it cannot keep up. What the pancreas truly needs is a steady, consistent release of glucose that allows it to function calmly. It thrives when meals are balanced with fiber, healthy fats, and proteins, all of which slow the absorption of glucose. It suffers when foods are refined, fast, and stripped of their natural structure. The harmony between insulin and glucagon can only be maintained when the diet respects the body's natural design. When we understand this delicate balance and begin to give the pancreas the gentle workload it was built for, we support not only healthy blood sugar, but the entire endocrine system that depends on this beautiful dance between two essential hormones. Fiber, protein, and healthy fats are the three pillars the body depends on to manage glucose smoothly, and yet they are often the very things missing from the modern diet. When these elements are present in a meal, they work like a gentle hand on the steering wheel, guiding glucose into the bloodstream at an even, steady pace. The pancreas sighs with relief because it no longer has to scramble to produce massive amounts of insulin all at once. But when they are absent, as they are in most fast, refined carbohydrate foods, the glucose rushes in a flash flood, overwhelming the system and forcing the pancreas into overdrive. Fiber, protein, and fat are not optional extras. They are essential breaks that slow down digestion and stabilize blood sugar, giving the pancreas time to work the way it was designed to. Fiber is one of nature's greatest gifts, and it does something remarkable when eaten with carbohydrates. It forms a kind of gel in the digestive tract that slows the breakdown and absorption of glucose. Instead of that sudden spike followed by a crash, fiber allows the glucose to be released in a slow, controlled manner. Humans once ate large amounts of natural fiber because their diets were full of vegetables, fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. But modern diets are stripped of fiber. White flour, white rice, sugary cereals, pastries, and processed breads have had the fiber removed, leaving nothing to slow down the release of sugar. This is why even a small portion of these refined foods can spike the blood sugar quickly and intensely. The body thrives on slow release, not the sudden surges created by fiberless foods. Protein is another stabilizing force. When you eat protein with a meal, it takes time to break down in the stomach. This slows the entire digestive process, giving the body a steady trickle of glucose rather than a flood. Protein keeps you full longer, reduces cravings for sweets, and helps prevent the mid-morning or mid-afternoon energy crash that drives people to reach for sugary snacks.
Historically, protein was consumed regularly: eggs, beans, lentils, fish, occasional meats, nuts, seeds, and dairy. But today, many people eat mostly carbohydrates in the morning and rely on refined snacks throughout the day. Without protein, blood sugar swings become inevitable, and the pancreas must continually react to the highs and lows. Healthy fats play an equally important role. For years, people were told to avoid fats, but good fats are necessary for stabilizing blood sugar. They slow digestion, keep you full, and provide long lasting energy. Avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil, coconut oil, and naturally occurring fats in whole foods help create meals that digest gently. When fats accompany carbohydrates, the glucose enters the bloodstream much more slowly. This is exactly what the pancreas needs. Without healthy fats, glucose rises too quickly and insulin has to rush in to bring it down. Many low fat or fat free products in the modern food industry compensate by adding sugar, making the situation worse by stripping out the very nutrient that would keep blood sugar stable. When a meal includes fiber, protein, and healthy fats, something beautiful happens. The pancreas no longer has to panic. Insulin is released steadily. Glucose enters the cells gently. The brain remains clear, the energy stays stable, and cravings fade. But the moment these elements are removed, the entire system becomes chaotic. The pancreas is pushed too hard, glucose spikes become sharp, and insulin resistance begins to develop. This is one of the primary reasons diabetes has exploded in recent years.
Natural companions that slow them down.
It's about eating carbohydrates without the natural companions that slow them down. The goal in managing blood sugar naturally is not to eliminate carbohydrates, but to balance them with the elements that the body relies on for proper glucose handling. When meals are built on vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, lean proteins, and healthy fats, the body receives a steady, predictable flow of energy. This is the environment a pancreas thrives in. It was never meant to work frantically all day trying to correct one spike after another. Fiber slows, protein steadies, healthy fats stabilize. These three are the keys to providing the gentle, sustained release of glucose that keeps the endocrine system functioning beautifully. It protects the pancreas from exhaustion. Refined sugar is one of the most disruptive substances as introduced into the human diet, and it plays a far greater role in the rise of diabetes than most people realize. When you take sugar cane in its natural form, it is fibrous, tough, and full of minerals, and it takes a great deal of chewing to rake down in a small amount of sweetness. But when that cane is refined, boiled, spun, crystallized, and stripped of every natural component, you are left with something entirely unnatural, pure, concentrated sucrose that the body was never meant to encounter in such a potent form. It takes an entire yard of sugar cane to produce just 1 teaspoon of refined sugar, and yet that teaspoon is swallowed in seconds without any fiber, without any nutrients, without any natural structure to slow it down. The moment it enters the bloodstream, blood sugar shoots up with explosive force. This is what I often describe as boom, an immediate surge that demands urgent action from the pancreas. The pancreas, sensing this sudden rise, releases a sharp wave of insulin to bring it back down. This drop can happen just as quickly as the spike, and when blood sugar falls too low, people feel shaky, irritable, hungry, fatigued, or anxious. The brain interprets this as a crisis, sending the person searching for more sugar or more fast carbohydrates to bring the levels back up again. This cycle repeats with every sugary drink, every dessert, every sweetened cereal, every pastry, every spoonful of sugar stirred into coffee or tea. The body becomes trapped in a pattern of soaring highs followed by crashing lows, like a seesaw that never settles. And each swing requires insulin, and then even more as the pancreas strains to keep up. Over time, this constant demand begins to wear down the pancreas. Just take any organ that is pushed beyond its natural limits. It starts to struggle. Cells throughout the body get exposed to so much insulin so frequently that they begin to resist its signal. They stop responding with the same sensitivity. This phenomenon is what we call insulin resistance. The body is producing insulin, sometimes in very high amounts, but the cells are no longer listening. Glucose stays in the bloodstream because the insulin message is no longer getting through. And yet the pancreas does not know that resistance is the problem. It simply sees high blood sugar and responds by sending out more insulin in an attempt to force the glucose inside. This is one of the most dangerous parts of the sugar cycle. The more insulin resistance develops, the more insulin the pancreas must produce. And the more insulin it produces, the more resistant the cells become. It is a vicious loop that eventually leads to elevated blood sugar levels even when sugar intake is reduced. The pancreas cannot keep up forever. After years of abuse, it grows fatigued, inflamed, and less capable of producing insulin at all. This is when diabetes becomes fully established, and it all begins long before people notice symptoms. It begins with the first regular exposure to refined sugar that teaches the body to spike it, crash, wearing away at the very system designed to maintain balance. When people say, "But I only eat a little sugar," they often forget that sugar hides in countless foods: ketchup, sauces, cereals, breads, yogurts, coffee drinks, crackers, packaged snacks, juices, and flavored waters. The tone is as to a teaspoon stirred into tea. It is the sugar embedded in nearly every processed product on supermarket shelves. The body does not distinguish where the sugar came from. It reacts the same way to all forms of refined sucrose and high fructose corn syrup. If refined sugar entered the bloodstream slowly, the pancreas might handle it differently. But if sugar is stripped of all fiber and natural components, it enters like a flood. This fast absorption is the true enemy. The body was never designed to deal with such a concentrated dose of sweetness delivered so rapidly and so frequently. The result is the constant whiplash effect: blood sugar up, blood sugar down, insulin down, and eventually a pancreas pushed beyond its biological capacity. This is why refined sugar is one of the primary drivers of modern diabetes, because the body cannot maintain its delicate balance when being slammed with unnatural sweetness day after day. Insulin resistance does not happen overnight. It is the slow, steady consequence of years of pushing the body beyond its natural limits, especially when it comes to sugar and refined carbohydrates. Every time someone eats a meal high in fast-release carbohydrates, white bread, pasta, pastries, sweets, sugary drinks, the pancreas gets called into action. It releases insulin to escort the glucose into the cells, and for a while the cells cooperate. They open their doors, take in the glucose, and the blood sugar returns to a normal level. But humans today eat these foods far more often than the body was designed to handle. Breakfast might be cereal or toast, lunch might be a sandwich or noodles, dinner might be pizza or rice, and in between there are snacks, coffees with sugar, and sweet treats. This means the pancreas is releasing insulin repeatedly, sometimes all day long, and the cells are being asked to respond constantly. Cells have a protective nature. They are designed to preserve balance and avoid overload. When insulin levels become too frequent, too high, or too sustained, the cells begin to push back. It is as if they say, "We cannot keep opening for every knock. You are overwhelming us." So they begin to resist the insulin signal. This is the beginning of insulin resistance. The insulin is still there, the glucose is still there, but the cells are no longer listening. What was once a smooth interaction becomes a struggle. The pancreas, unaware of the resistance at the cellular level, thinks the problem is a lack of insulin, so it produces more. This extra insulin circulates in the bloodstream, trying to force the cells to comply, but the cells continue resisting, becoming even more stubborn over time. This is the silent stage where many people feel hungry all the time, even after eating. They may crave sweets or carbohydrates because the glucose in the blood is not getting into the cells where it is needed. Fatigue becomes common because energy is locked out. Weight gain becomes easier because insulin is a fat storage hormone. And yet people often have no idea that their cells are resisting insulin. They simply think they need more food or sugar to feel better. This creates a dangerous loop. Person eats more carbohydrates, glucose rises even higher, the pancreas pushes out more insulin, and the cells resist even more fiercely. Insulin resistance is the root of type 2 diabetes. When the cells have resisted for long enough, the pancreas becomes exhausted. It cannot keep producing the huge amounts of insulin required to overcome the resistance, and eventually insulin levels begin to fall. At that moment, fasting blood sugar rises. Post-meals blood sugar rises. Glucose begins to spill into the urine because the body cannot handle the excess. This is when diabetes becomes diagnosable, but the truth is that the process began years before, during the phase of quiet resistance when no symptoms were obvious. What is important to understand is that insulin resistance is the body attempt to protect itself. It is not the enemy, it is a protective mechanism gone too far. Because of the modern diet, refined carbohydrates and sugars hit the bloodstream so fast and so frequently that the body feels attacked by the constant waves of glucose. The cells, in trying to protect themselves from overload, actually create a far more dangerous situation, but this resistance can be reversed when the pressure is removed. When people stop eating fast-release carbohydrates, reduce sugar, and turn to fiber-rich foods, healthy fats, and proteins, something remarkable happens. Insulin levels start to fall. The cells begin to reopen their doors. Sensitivity returns. The pancreas gets a rest. The entire hormonal system begins to restore balance. Insulin resistance is not a life sentence. It is a physiological response to a lifestyle that overwhelms the body with glucose day after day. When that lifestyle changes, the body begins to heal. The cells were never meant to resist insulin. They were simply trying to survive in an environment that pushed them too hard. When we give them a calmer, steadier rhythm of nourishment, they respond with relief, and the path toward reversing diabetes becomes possible. Insulin resistance is one of the most misunderstood conditions in modern health, and yet it sits at the very center of the diabetes epidemic. People often apprehend diabetes as something that suddenly appears when the pancreas stops working, but the truth is that long before glucose rises on a medical test, a quiet battle has already been happening inside the cells. Every cell in the body depends on insulin to receive glucose. Insulin is the key, the gentle messenger, the signal that tells the cell, open your doors, the fuel has arrived. But when insulin begins knocking too hard, too often, and in too large amounts, the cell eventually becomes overwhelmed and starts to resist that signal. That resistance is the beginning of diabetes. When someone eats a diet filled with refined carbohydrates, white bread, white rice, sugary cereals, pastries, noodles, crackers, sweetened drinks, the digestive system breaks all of it down into glucose very quickly. This rapid digestion sends blood sugar soaring. The pancreas responds immediately by releasing a surge of insulin to bring the levels down. But because these foods digest so fast, insulin often lowers the blood sugar too far, leaving the person tired, shaky, hungry, or craving something sweet. The brain mistakes this for hunger and signals the person to eat again, usually reaching for another quick carbohydrate. And the moment they do, the pancreas must release another strong wave of insulin. This pattern repeats all day long, meal after meal, snack after snack. Over time, the cells begin to feel besieged. They're constantly being asked to take in glucose at a pace the body was never designed to handle. Insulin levels remain high for hours, sometimes even all day. And just like someone who's been shouted at repeatedly stops listening, the cells begin to ignore insulin's message. They close their doors. They protect themselves from what feels like an overwhelming force. This is insulin resistance, not a failure of the pancreas at first, but a refusal of the cells to respond to the hormone. The tragedy is that the pancreas does not understand that resistance is the problem. All it sees is high blood sugar, so it assumes it must not be producing enough insulin. In desperation, it produces more. This creates the state where insulin is chronically elevated, sometimes 2, 3, even 5 times higher than normal, long before a person is diagnosed with diabetes. People may feel tired after meals, crave sugar frequently, gain weight easily, store fat and the abdomen, or feel brain fog, but they rarely connect these symptoms to insulin resistance. If nothing changes, the cycle continues until the pancreas can no longer keep up. It begins to tire and weaken. Its ability to produce insulin falls, sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly. And because the cells are still resistant, glucose finally begins to rise in the blood. This is the moment doctors notice. But the truth is that insulin resistance may have been developing for 10, 15, even 20 years before that moment. It is a slow breakdown caused by years of overwhelming the system with too much glucose too quickly. The beautiful part is that insulin resistance is not permanent. When the flood of rapid-release carbohydrates stops and the body receives slow, steady sources of glucose from vegetables, legumes, whole foods, healthy fats, and proteins, the cells begin to reopen, the pancreas breathes again, and the entire system can be restored to balance. Modern wheat is not the same wheat that our great-grandparents ate, and its transformation has played a significant role in the rise of diabetes. In the 1950s, Dr. Norman Borlaug began crossbreeding wheat to create a plant that produced a much higher yield.
Old wheat used to grow tall, waist high, or high, with long, elegant stalks. But when a stalk grows tall and produces a heavy head of grain, it becomes fragile.
The plant bends, breaks, and becomes difficult to harvest. So scientists worked tirelessly to create a shorter, sturdier plant with a thick stem and an enormous amount of grain. Their intention was noble, to fight hunger in developing countries, and they succeeded in increasing yield. But something else changed in the process, something no one recognized at the time. The hybridization of wheat altered its internal chemistry, especially its starch structure. The natural wheat that humans had eaten for thousands of years contained a combination of starches that digested slowly, releasing glucose gradually into the bloodstream. But the new hybrid wheat produced a starch called amylopectin A, a rapidly absorbed starch that spikes blood sugar faster than almost any other carbohydrate. In fact, amylopectin A raises blood sugar even faster than table sugar in many cases. This starch behaves as a quick-release fuel, lighting up the bloodstream with glucose almost the moment it is eaten. When a person eats bread, pasta, crackers, or pastries made from modern wheat, the glucose rush begins quickly and powerfully. The pancreas must respond instantly with a surge of insulin. And because wheat-based foods are eaten so frequently, toast in the morning, a sandwich at lunch, crackers at a snack, pasta for dinner, the body is exposed to repeated insulin surges all day long. This perpetual spike and crash cycle pushes the pancreas to work beyond its natural limits, and over time it contributes directly to insulin resistance. Amylopectin A is not the only starch in foods, of course. Bananas and potatoes, for example, contain amylopectin B. This form of starch raises blood sugar, but not as dramatically as wheat. And beans and legumes contain amylopectin C, which breaks down slowly and provides a gentle, steady rise in glucose, exactly what the pancreas prefers. The problem is that amylopectin A dominates modern diets because wheat dominates modern diets. When most of the carbohydrates consumed come from wheat-based products, the body is bombarded with a starch that was never part of nature's original design. When hybrid wheat was created, it was rushed into agriculture without any safety studies on how the new starch structures might affect human metabolism. At that time, food was not commonly evaluated for long-term metabolic effects, and no one imagined that altering a plant structure could impact an entire population health. Yet today, wheat-based processed foods fill supermarket shelves. Breakfast cereals, breads, cookies, muffins, pizza crusts, crackers, tortillas, and even sauces and soups contain wheat. And every time a person eats these foods, amylopectin A sends their blood sugar surging. Because this new wheat is everywhere, the modern diet is constantly stimulating the pancreas with rapid glucose spikes, and this relentless stimulation is one of the underlying forces weakening insulin sensitivity and driving the rise in diabetes. When people begin replacing wheat-heavy meals with foods containing amylopectin C beans, lentils, chickpeas, the body finally gets the slow, steady glucose curve it was designed to handle. The pancreas rests, insulin levels drop, and the cells become more receptive again. Traditional fats have been deeply misunderstood in modern nutrition, and yet they are some of the most important allies we have when it comes to stabilizing blood sugar and supporting insulin sensitivity. Long before industrial oils existed, human beings used fats that came directly from nature: olive oil pressed from the fruit of the olive tree, coconut oil extracted from grated coconut flesh, butter churned from whole milk, tallow from grass-fed animals, cream skimmed from fresh dairy. These fats were familiar to the body because they were whole, unaltered, and carrying with them vitamins, antioxidants, and natural compounds that supported cellular health. They nourished the brain, soothed inflammation, stabilized hormones, and slowed digestion so glucose could enter the bloodstream gently instead of rushing in with a flood. When people ate these fats, their meals digested in harmony with the body's natural rhythm, and diabetes was exceedingly rare. But something dramatic changed during the Industrial Revolution. Machines capable of crushing hard seeds, seeds that had never been used for oil before, made it possible to mass-produce oils that the human body was never meant to consume. Corn oil, soy oil, canola oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil, vegetable oil, margarine. These products came from seeds so hard that they required extreme heat, chemical solvents, and deodorizing processes to extract anything usable. By the time these oils reached the bottle, their molecular structure had been distorted by heat, stripped of nutrients, and chemically altered. They were cheap, they were easy to produce, and they were marketed as heart healthy, even though nothing in history supported that idea. And gradually, the traditional fats that humans used for thousands of years were replaced with these refined, unstable seed oils. When these industrial oils enter the body, the cells do not recognize them because they no longer resemble natural fats. Their damaged structure can be compared to a bent key trying to fit into a lock. They can lodge themselves in cell membranes, stiffening them, altering communication, and contributing to inflammation. Over time, this inflammation interferes with the ability of insulin receptors to function properly. A cell that should want insulin becomes resistant. A membrane that should respond smoothly becomes sluggish. Glucose that should enter the cell remains trapped in the bloodstream. This is one of the silent mechanisms behind insulin resistance, a problem that begins long while blood sugar rises high enough to diagnose diabetes. On the other hand, when we bring back traditional fats, the body responds with relief. Extra virgin olive oil contains natural antioxidants, polyphenols, and anti-inflammatory compounds that support the health of every cell membrane. Coconut oil contains medium-chain fatty acids that are easily absorbed and provide smooth, steady energy without burdening insulin. Organic butter from grass-fed cows contains vitamins A, D, E, and K2, as well as fatty acids that strengthen cells and support metabolism. The body knows exactly what to do with these fats because they are part of its natural language. They soften inflammation, improve insulin sensitivity, stabilize digestion, and help steady the release of glucose. They don't spike blood sugar. They don't overwhelm the pancreas. They help regulate the entire hormonal and metabolic system. Modern industrial oils act as intruders in the body, disrupting communication and throwing the metabolic system into chaos. Traditional fats behave like friends who help restore order and calm. When meals are prepared with olive oil, coconut oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, and small amounts of natural dairy fats, the glucose from that meal enters the bloodstream slowly, and the pancreas can work at a gentle, steady pace. Insulin receptors stay responsive. The cells remain receptive. The body maintains balance with far less effort. This is how humans lived for centuries, eating fats from nature in their whole form without chemical interference. The shift back to traditional fats is not just a dietary decision, it is a return to a way of eating that honors the body design. By eliminating industrial seed oils and bringing back the fats that nourished generations before us, we reduce inflammation, improve metabolic health, and help reverse the insulin resistance that lies at the heart of type 2 diabetes. The body performs best when fed with what nature provides directly, not what factories manipulate into the shape of food. Traditional fats support this natural harmony, allowing the endocrine system to work with ease instead of strain.